welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin, and a lot on the agenda. One of the things I think is most interesting to me, and hopefully you and our listeners, is that weakness always creates a vacuum. And I think it creates a vacuum in the media, in foreign policy, and in politics. I think in the media, we see, and it's not completely reliant on him or a result of Biden and his weakness and his failures, but you see a whole shakeout in the media. You see Facebook shares plummeting, their value plummeting, and you see the continuation of the CNN fallout, which to me is fascinating because if you were going to put a gun to my head, I think there's a sea change with the Discovery Network buying them out. I believe they're going to switch to more of a hard news and abandoning the far left philosophy and business model that Zucker has implemented over the last many years, and returning to possibly the CNN that we, I'll use the term, grew up on or once knew in terms of the Gulf Wars and other things. It was the go-to network, and their ratings always go up and down, but nothing like this. This is a precipitous drop of, I think they've lost like crazy amounts, like 70% of their listeners. Your comment?
Well, CNN's ratings, through the basement. And it's honestly not that surprising because they built their ratings over the past several years on attacking Donald Trump. And basically what's happening is, they pushed that the Wuhan lab leak theory was, bunk. There was no way that was possible. Turns out that that's probable. Exactly. They pushed the Steele dossier. Turns out to be fake. They lost all journalistic integrity. And so you have people who were watching it for news going, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, and leaving them. And then they've got their left-wing base, and they're going, well, you don't have any credibility. I may like what you say, but it doesn't seem to be true.
You need to hang on to that. That's important. You may like I could tell you you're a rock star, you're in the next Elvis. You might love what I have to say about you, Dr. Lopkin, but that doesn't mean you don't start tuning out by saying, this is not credible. And I think what you say is a very salient point. You might like what someone has to say, but if you know they're lying, what's the point in viewing them?
Right. And, we've seen this over and over again with liberal networks. Liberal networks do not survive unless they're attacking somebody. And this goes all the way back to the radio network Air America.
Oh, God.
Oh,
that's where Rachel Maddow, I think, got her start. And now, on the whole thing about the media, she's taking a hiatus to work on a film. That's like when you say to someone, I'm working on a novel. What it really means is you're unemployed. Comment? It didn't just happen out of the blue.
She's not unemployed. She's still under contract with MSNBC. But even she realizes she has been pushing lies for so long, she's got no credibility. And it's the same reason ABC pulled Whoopi Goldberg off The View for 2 weeks. If you pull them away from the public eye, hopefully people will forget about everything that they did and everything that was wrong. And when they come back, they'll get that fresh start. That's really
much more accurate. I agree 100%. But the final comment I'd like an insight from you, and our listeners would certainly appreciate, is do you think that there's going to be a realignment in the media? Forget about being a do-gooder and blah, blah, blah. Business is business, and in your ratings, when you have 600,000 viewers, that's like a station in New York City, like Channel 2 probably has that. But it's Channel 2. I mean, 600,000. My God, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Reruns of Petticoat Junction get more than that.
yeah, when it comes down to business, those ratings are going to cripple the AT&T deal. Remember, Discovery hasn't actually bought
No,
Warner
yes,
Media yet.
intending, yes.
Yeah, that's still going through. Well, Discovery Channel's got to be looking at this going, you sold us, a bag of crap here. They're leaving in droves. Viewers are leaving in droves. People are getting fired in droves, mostly for sexual misconduct, which is not good. I think when Discovery steps in, they're going to go, no, we have to get rid of everybody and put a fresh coat
There's
of paint
no
on the
question about it. I think it's going to be refreshing to all of us because I watch something that's liberally oriented, fine. But we've already talked about it. I don't want to belabor a point. But CNN, compared to 25 years ago, is unwatchable. It's the biggest bunch of dribble I've ever seen. And it's not because I'm, right-leaning. It just sucks. It's not interesting. It's garbage.
Now, if Warner Media really wants to fix CNN, they need to go back to their roots. And right now, this very minute, send correspondents into the Ukraine and be ready for whatever Russia does. Because if you remember, CNN became CNN because they reported every day live from Baghdad. They need to go back to those roots.
I agree. And here's what perplexes me. Zucker, supposedly, the genius of media, all this crap. You're a smart guy, get it. But isn't that kind of common? Why aren't they doing that? Hello? Resurrect your brand. That in one fell swoop could change CNN's perception. But Zucker was so focused on bringing down Trump and being a left-wing, pretty much water boy, that he screwed the whole thing up.
Well, so it was more than just going after Trump, because if you remember, prior to Trump, Zucker was pulling CNN away from news. He was giving shows to Anthony Bourdain. They were doing, non-news shows because Zucker doesn't understand news. The Today Show was never about news. It was always about entertainment. And that's Zucker's whole background. So the idea that he was going after news was ridiculous. He doesn't know news. Now they've really got to step back and go, all right, this is a news network. We need to return to that.
My retort to that, Dr. Lopkin, would be, I don't think he really even knows entertainment. I think he just got lucky. I think CNN, I would rather watch cat videos on YouTube, but we'll close on that. Well, Black Lives Matter. The Dems are starting to bail on that. Very interesting. There's no one home at Black Lives Matter. The leader, I don't recall her name offhand, bought like a multi-million. It was a fleecing operation, essentially, an anti-Semitic fleecing operation as well.
Well,
the only one that's standing pat is Cori Bush.
Yeah, right now there is nobody at the helm of Black Lives Matter.
Exactly.
Now let's just clarify for the sake of transparency. We're talking about Black Lives Matter, the organization, not the movement.
Of course, 100%.
Well, I honestly believe they chose the name to confuse people, but the Black Lives Matter organization right now has nobody in charge of it. They're under investigation because there's $60 million in their bank account that donors gave them, and nobody knows how it's being used. Nobody knows who has access to it. This entire thing is turning out to be a scam.
It's a Ponzi scheme at the level of Bernie Madoff. And when you have California investigating you, you have problems. Speaking of problems, we have Pelosi, a walking problem. She came out and says, just shut up and play in the Olympics. Yeah, that's right up there with Roosevelt and Churchill, standing by your beliefs. Also, it came out that she's the big proponent of climate change. And as we said on this podcast many times, with liberalism and socialism, now they're about one and the same. It's do as I say, not as I do. She's racked up more plane miles and burned more fuel in private jets than the Led Zeppelin tour of 1975.
Yeah, it always amazes me how many climate conferences are attended by people flying there in private jets. The hypocrisy is unbelievable. Pelosi, now, with climate change, it is, quite frankly, she's never been a real big proponent of climate change. She's only been saying it to give lip service to the squad and the left because they're basically holding her hostage. In terms of what she says over the Olympics, I'm very torn about her statement because on the one side, I do agree with her. We are not in any position, thanks to getting rid of soldiers due to vaccine mandates, not preparing for military actions, thanks to paying attention to pronouns. We're actually not in a position to get our athletes back if China decides to take them prisoner for speaking out against China. So on the one hand, I understand why she's saying this. On the other hand, for decades, athletes have been free to speak out against the host nation. I mean, going back to Germany in the 1930s, the fact that we are
Jesse Owens.
Yes, the fact that we are no longer in a position to protect our athletes from this, and the fact that the IOC gave China not one but 2 Olympics is
let's give our
absolutely unacceptable.
How about head of oncology at Harvard Hospital to Joseph Mengele?
Yeah, I mean, the IOC issued a statement saying, well, when they decide to, where the Olympics are going, they're above politics. That is bull.
It's about as bunch of bullshit I've ever heard.
And in these genocide games, for the few people who have been watching, you'll notice that most athletes who are beating China are being disqualified from competition. There's no good reason. There's no good reasons given. It's just, no. They're not following our way of thinking, so they're disqualified.
What's the difference between that and Berlin, Germany Olympics?
The difference is that in Berlin, Germany didn't rig the games. Jesse Owens showed them up. China is literally rigging the Olympic Games. The idea that the IOC can stand for this is absolutely disgusting.
Another organization, just like the FBI and others, CIA, that have lost all credibility. And something, good riddance, because the Olympic ratings are down 52%. I think the only salvation for them is to hire Zucker. Maybe it'll go down 80% next Olympics. Ottawa, the freedom protests. Interesting. There was a GoFundMe page effort to support the truckers, and they pulled the plug on that. But they never pulled the plug on basically funding radical organizations, including Black Lives Matter. Gee, you think there's a hypocrisy here?
Well, there's a huge hypocrisy, but also this is a very coordinated effort, because starting at the top with Prime Minister Trudeau, who has been actively lying about what is going on in Ottawa. He's saying there's swastikas being displayed. And at one point, he claimed the Confederate flag was being displayed. What Canadian is going to display a Confederate flag?
Meanwhile, how about none?
Meanwhile, when you actually look at the video, because there's loads of video out there, it's going out all over. You've got you've got kids in bouncy houses, you've got fireworks and firecrackers going off. These guys are having a party. There's no hate, whatever. What I really loved was some video that came out last night because Trudeau, sorry, not Trudeau, I believe it was the mayor of Ottawa announced that if anybody tried to give gas to the truckers, they were going to be arrested. Well, last night, the video came out. Hundreds of Canadians showed up carrying cans of gas for the truckers.
Is this a sea change? I really do believe it's true. And let me also comment really quickly before you have your insights, is that Justin Trudeau is about as competent as my cat Carl. I think Carl's more competent. He never accomplished just like Newsom, never accomplished a damn thing in his life. His father was a playboy, okay, that pretty much screwed up Canada. This guy was a boxer. And that's what he says. I doubt he ever went into the ring.
No. I'm absolutely sure he went into the ring because that's the only thing that's the only thing that explains his actions is being hit in the head too many times.
I agree. Too many concussions. But it's a pretty boy that accomplished nothing. He's a coward. Instead of when I say standing, I mean engaging in dialogue like a real person of character would do, he runs for the hills like a little wussy boy. His administration is over.
It is. The mayor of Toronto was commenting today on what was going on. And he said point blank that Trudeau is staying true to his playbook. Trudeau's playbook, anytime anybody has criticized him, has been to double down and accuse them of racism. Now, I don't know how racism enters into any of this, but apparently that's Trudeau's go-to, and that's what he's doing now. He's attacking the truckers as racist and white supremacists, which is nothing could be further from the truth. Trudeau was not a popular leader to begin with. He barely squeaked by into the seat in his last election. I don't think he's got a prayer in hell of getting in again.
No, it could be, something. Sometimes bad things just like in life, turn out to be positive. You get laid off or something happens to you, you find another direction. I believe this is a bigger movement than the media has given it credit for. And speaking of, go ahead.
All of what we've been talking about is related. The protests, the drop in the liberal media ratings, the attacks on big tech with Facebook losing money, GoFundMe losing credibility, because they have underestimated people. And these tactics that they've been using cannot stand in the light. And it started during COVID when parents were seeing what was going on in the classrooms for the first time. But you don't mess with parents. They will do anything for their kids.
Nope, you never mess with a mother and her cub. That's a
exactly.
fact.
And now we are seeing that big change going, no, now we not only do we know what you're up to, we might have always suspected, but now we have concrete proof of what you are trying to pull. And people are saying enough is enough. It's been going on. Honestly, it's been going on since the 60s. But now, with it becoming more and more blatant, with it coming out that, yes, the stories about Hunter Biden and Biden's corruptions, they're true. The fact that the Steele dossier was completely made up. The fact that the teachers did not want to get kids back in the classroom when parents needed to. And I came across some very interesting information earlier today. Um, the liberal media, the Biden administration, all these folks have been, pushing lockdowns, pushing mask mandates. They knew, the government at least knew, that there was no point in pushing these, because during the Spanish flu in 1918 and 1919, they actually did mask mandates and lockdowns on certain military bases, and they didn't do them on other military bases so that they could actually see the effect. And as it turned out, there was virtually no difference in the infection and death rates between the two.
Okay, but doesn't it really point to the fact, have we really progressed or degressed as a society? That's 100 years ago, and they had the friggin' brains without computers, without the technology to basically think it through without being a bunch of morons and politically driven idiots.
No, politics has gotten into everything. It's no longer about the data. And let's face it, a lot of this goes back to the fact that more and more of the public school systems have been geared towards indoctrinating kids rather than teaching them. How far have we fallen in the last 50 years in educational ratings? We used to be at the top in STEM, in English, in math. Now we're lucky if we hit the top 30.
I would say it's lucky if we knew how to circle the clown versus the pigeon. There you go. Anyway, yes. I think what you have is a very good analysis, though, Dr. Lopkin, and that is the whole thing about a bridge too far. You talk about the 60s, 70s, 80s, blah, 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 all accurate. But I think, like anything else, like in science, anything else, you reach a tipping point. And I think we're there. In other words, people are pretty tolerant. They have jobs. They have occupations. They have a family. They have all that stuff. And then when you get to push the envelope just a little bit too much, or in this case, way too much, people have a problem with that, don't they? And I think we're at that point. Do you think I'm right?
We are definitely at that point, because we have reached the point where people are realizing that when the government says, oh, we're going to give you something, what they really mean is that we are taking things away from people. And now it's not just a matter of class warfare where they're taking money from the rich. Now people are seeing it in their day-to-day lives. Hispanics are leaving the Democratic Party in droves because these folks fought to become U.S. citizens legally, and now Biden is just handing out money and supplies to people crossing the border illegally. You're seeing people say, wait a minute, why should the government be paying so many people to stay home when I have a job and I've been working? And it's not the rich that are seeing that, oh, we're losing things. It's the lower middle class and the middle class that are saying, no, this is not my America. This is not my country. We need to take this back. And it's not just America. That's what's happening with the truckers in Canada as well. And let's face it, it's been the subject of a lot of jokes for decades about how polite Canadians are. How bad did it have to get for this many Canadians to go, enough?
It means a lot. And I think it's part of a more Western societal push against what's happening. It's reached the breaking point. And I think part of that, we talk about the media, is Joe Rogan. And basically, the effort continues, but I think he won out because he did apologize, but he didn't become a bitch. I mean, he pushed back. He got other offers, and 70 plus hippies that were supposed to be about free speech and all this other stuff basically turned out to be hypocrites. And I'm not so sure they didn't do it just to get back into the limelight, because the last time Neil Young had a hit was the last time there was a total eclipse of the sun.
Well, honestly, if you've been paying attention to what Neil Young has been saying, he's pushing his new Sirius XM channel. So I actually believe the only reason he did this was to generate publicity for the Sirius XM channel. I think
It's
this
called Raising
entire
the
thing
Dead.
I think this whole thing has been a publicity stunt for him.
It could be. You know, you talk about the authenticity of hippies. Well, everyone, like just like Ben and Jerry's, you know, they started out smoking some dope and making some ice cream. They turned out to be as much of a corporate bloodsucker as anyone. They sold their company to Unilever. Who knows how many people got laid off? On that same, the kind of the same vent, but Stacey Abrams, another true genius, an intelligentsia. I wonder if she's not finished, Dr. Lopkin. And I will have a party if she is.
Yeah, the photos that came out of her unmasked amid a sea of children who are required to wear masks.
Yes.
Did so much damage to her. She used to be considered to be very much on the ball politically, and this just blew it out of the water. And it also showcased the hypocrisy of the liberal media, because when Trump claims that the 2020 election was rigged against him, they all go, "Oh, he's trying to overturn an election. He's dangerous. He's a threat to democracy." Stacey Abrams has been making the same claim about the Georgia governor's race since she lost, and yet the liberal media has been supporting her. So apparently,
and can I ask you a question on that, though? What exactly are her qualifications? And you can only take 5 seconds to please respond to that.
She has
Zero.
No real qualifications, but let's be fair about this. How many qualifications do most politicians have?
Good retort. Yes, I agree with that. Very good. So do you think she's finished? I think she suffered a big blow. I'll use that. I'll say that.
Yeah, I don't know if this was the death blow for her career or not, but it's certainly on life support.
Support.
And right now, there are two other candidates for governor in Georgia. So it looked very bleak for her to get past the primaries anyway.
To begin with, yes.
So now I think it's that much more difficult for her.
I would agree with that. Now, you talk about being tone deaf. Gigi Sean, you talk about the Biden administration, and she's been nominated for the head of the FCC, a complete left-wing whack job. Now, you have to understand, you have to brace the fact that Biden is bleeding. His administration is bleeding. You think, I forgot who his chief of staff is, but like maybe Colonel Clown, whatever. You think, have Jane Smith, a normal person. This person's a freak. She's a left-wing whack job. She wanted One American News Network to be pushed off certain cable channels. She's totally basically a Marxist. How tone deaf can you be? In the middle of the Titanic, he puts up this whack job.
Well, this is just par for the course. I mean, yes, he puts up an FCC chairman who's for censorship. He's also put up somebody to take a charge of the banking system who thinks banks should be abolished. It's bizarro world if you take a look at Biden's appointees. Almost every one of them has been the antithesis of what you actually want to see in that position. And it's because I don't even know if Biden knows these people's names.
Oh, God, no.
Being put up by the wackos on the left trying to dismantle America. And you can see it
put in
each of these appointments.
But you think this for political survival. Well, no, he's not capable of it. So why even waste any time? But it shows a total lack of wherewithal or what's going on. And speaking of that, the Dems are increasingly distancing themselves from Biden. They know it's a free fall. They know it's a complete collapse. And in fact, a recent poll, and it's not a right-wing nutcase poll, came out and said he's a 38% approval rating. I'd love to see the 38% that actually think he's competent. I think it's lower than that. Essentially, the Democrats are fleeing him like a bad habit.
Yeah, and it's not just the voters and the approval rating. Democratic operatives are fleeing him as well. He keeps pushing for more mask mandates. Meanwhile, Democratic governors are removing mandates all across the country. And the one thing all of those governors have in common is that they're all up for re-election. They know that people are tired of this. Democrats who are running for election in November, the White House has offered Biden services to campaign for them, and almost none of them have gotten back to him. Because
that's like having a loved one in critical care and soliciting Dr. Kevorkian to assist in the process. Probably not a good idea.
Yeah, at this point, Biden, the best analogy I can think of is that Biden is the relative to the Democratic Party who you only want to really deal with at Thanksgiving, and even then you'd rather they stay home. But
yes.
It's the one when you see the number on the caller ID, you pretend you're not by your phone. Nobody wants to hear from him anymore. He has become poison to the Democratic Party. And John Kennedy yesterday had two just absolutely brilliant comments. One was that wokeism runs through the Democratic family. It practically gallops. And the second comment he made is that reality calls every day and Biden hangs up.
Oh, yeah. No, it's his handlers. When you look at him, and I'm not repeating any talking points, you just see him. I saw him at a press conference, I would say a week ago. And my God, if it was my uncle or one of my older family members, I would be concerned. Dr. Jill Biden, let him off the stage like basically you're talking Weekend at Bernie's. This guy is going down exponentially every minute.
No,
it's becoming an embarrassment.
Yeah, there have been people within the Democratic Party who have floated the idea that these folks need to be investigated for elder abuse for the way they're trotting him out.
Is that really in the Democratic Party?
There are Democrats who are saying this.
Well, I think if I was a Democrat in let's say a purple state like Arizona and others, you got to be scared shitless. And no one has your back. It's not like Clinton in the 90s when he did an about-face, a 180, and became an effective president. This guy's not in charge. He's a captive of the far left, and he continues on this course. He's a kamikaze pilot.
We are seeing signs that the Democratic Party is taking their crisis seriously, though. There have been a number of people who have already announced that they will be primarying members of the squad. So the Democrats know that this push to the left has killed them. It is pushing America away from them. And in some areas, they're starting to respond. Even in New York City, Eric Adams, he's made some comments over the last day that make me think he's nuts. But at least he was able to stand up to the defund the police movement, to the folks that are going, oh, no, we have to do bail reform. It's like he's fighting back against this. And you're seeing more and more of this across the country. I don't think they're going to be able to turn it around in time for November's elections. I still think they're going to get shellacked. But I think there are enough Democrats who see this who are going, all right, so once we get past the elections, we've got to pull back. We have got to move to the center. Otherwise, we are just committing suicide.
Agreed. But you know something? Unlike the last primary with the Democratic Party, which was like, woof, too bad I don't smoke pot anymore. I mean, my God, you could like, it was like every freak show in the world, Kamala leading the charge. I think, just like Reagan did, rescuing the Republican Party in 1980, I really believe there's a huge opportunity for like a Ford or others, a moderate Manchin-esque kind of candidate that could resonate. I think that that ship has sailed. Do you think I'm incorrect?
No, you're right. I mean, the left wing is becoming less and less relevant, except within the party right now. If they start rallying around Manchin, around cinema, for those of you on social media, I urge you to follow Tulsi Gabbard. She has made some absolutely brilliant analyses. There are people in the Democratic Party that know what's going on and are capable of rescuing this party from the disaster it's become.
I think she may be the hidden rising star. She actually came out, she had the ho-hos to say, you know, Biden saying, I want to nominate, you know, there has to be a black woman for the Supreme Court. She was like, well, you did that before with Kamala. This is a Democrat. And that was a disaster. Please don't do it again. That's cojones.
Yeah, it is. She has spoken up against the Democratic leadership. She has spoken up against the left. Remember, she spoke up against Hillary Clinton. Hillary tried to paint her as a Russian operative, basically from the same Steele dossier, I guess. That's basically Hillary's go-to is if you're against her, you're a Russian operative. Well, guess what? Gabbard's not a Russian operative. She's an intelligent woman, and God willing, she is the future, along with Manchin, along with cinema.
And I would vote for her. How does that sound?
Absolutely. If Gabbard was running for president, I would endorse her. I would vote for her. She knows what's going on.
100%. She's where America is and where the squad is not, and where, well, Biden's not even on this planet. Yeah, and speaking of that, if she ran against Trump, I would vote for her. How does that sound?
I actually would vote for Tulsi Gabbard over Donald Trump because, honestly, they actually have a lot of the same viewpoints. She's a lot less extreme, and she knows how to put her ego aside and get things done for the good of the American people.
Unlike Donald Trump, who didn't. I agree with almost every one of his policies, but there is something inherently deficient with his psyche. I'm not a psychologist. I don't really give a shit to be one. Okay. But here you go with you talking about Donald Trump. What's his name for the Senator Graham? What's his name again?
Graham.
Lindsey Graham. Sorry about that. Lindsey Graham basically gave him all the accolades you could ever imagine. He's the future. He's this. He's that. Well, I'm thinking even Lindsey Graham's kind of positioning himself to maybe be a vice presidential candidate. What does Trump do? He's a rhino. And you're like, oh, you know, I actually had, obviously, I voted for Trump over numbnuts, but still. Yeah, everyone had Trump fatigue. He's like picking fights with like the waitress at Denny's. Enough is enough.
No, Trump has gone too far. Mike Pence made a very intelligent statement about what went on January 6th, about how the vice president does not have the power to overturn an election, and about how the process actually takes place. And Trump attacked him. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Trump is killing the Republican Party because he cannot put aside his ego. Again, I voted for Trump. I am a supporter of his policies, but the man needs to go away. His time is done. He needs to step aside.
And I believe that, where did I hear this? But it was something I read or heard that, yes, he's still the elephant in the room, no pun intended, but he's not the elephant he was I believe 3 years is an eternity in politics. I believe he will not have the mojo to get it done. I think people need to know.
He already doesn't have the mojo to get it done, because we learned this in the Virginia gubernatorial election, because Youngkin actually separated from Trump. The Democrats tried to make that entire election a referendum on Trump, and it did not work. Youngkin was, able to take the seat despite Trump's endorsement by not having Trump campaign with him. And I think that's what you're going to see in the November elections. They're not going to turn him away. They're going to be polite to him, but nobody is going to be going out of their way to have Trump at their side. They're going to align themselves with some of the policies that he put forward, but they are keeping their distance from Trump, the man.
100% agree, and I think that's salvation. If he's impossible for him to put his ego, aside. He's the one who screwed up. Many of my conservative friends are pissed at him because he's the one who lost it. He did lose the election. I know there's an election flow. There was irregularities, all that stuff, right? Election fraud. But he opened up the because he was such a friggin' dumbass. Starting with COVID, not his policies again. His policies are right on, but he was, tweeting about all this crap. And then the first debate, he lost it, and he gave us Joe the moron Biden. Am I not correct?
Yeah, he cannot get out of the way of his own ego. If they had taken his phone away from him and not allowed him to tweet, he might still be president.
And I'll just throw one other thing. Even if you don't friggin' believe it, have a fireside chat. We're all in this together. I'm talking about COVID. But he couldn't keep it in his pants. He couldn't keep it together that he's talking about, texting about or tweeting about Fauci. Yeah, Fauci's a moron. I get it. But just keep it together. We're in the crisis. People are looking, just like FDR in World War, people are looking for a unifier, not a divider, and that's where he screwed up. We'll leave on a more lighter note, the Super Bowl. Are you going to watch it, number one? And who are you going for, number two? And number three, who do you think is going to win?
I have no idea who's going to win. I haven't decided if I'm even going to watch.
Like a politician, Dr. Lopkin.
Honestly, I did not pay attention to anything in the postseason. My teams, I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I root for the Jets and the Giants. The Jets and the Giants have been mathematically eliminated until 2026 at this point. So, it's...
Actually, they'll be in the Super Bowl when all the planets align. And because you're younger than me, give a shout out to me because it'll be like 2035, I believe.
Yeah, I really haven't paid attention, so I don't know who's going to win. Although, just because of how long it's been since they've gotten there, I kind of hope the Bengals take it.
I like the Bengals, and because I'm twisted and anything that's California-ish, I can do without. So goodbye, L.A. Hello, Middle America. Go Bengals, go Cats. Well, Dr. Lopkin, that concludes another edition of Carnivore Bites. And we are growing in our audience, aren't we?
We are. You can catch every episode at the Carnivore Radio website, as well as xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, wherever you find podcasts. And you can follow us on our new social media platforms at Xvadio Media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And can't they have our audience? Can't they suggest topics that they would enjoy?
You can suggest topics. You can comment on our podcast, all by going to xvadio.com/connect.
Dr. Lopkin, great show. Thank our listeners, and thank you, Dr. Lopkin.
We'll see you next week.